Okay, so let's look at our code one more time. The first thing that we did was in our framework.php file, we created an event, and we did so through the dispatch method of our dispatcher. Now, dispatcher is created over here in our front.php file, right here, and then we pass it into our framework here. So if we go back to our framework, we have our dispatcher, and we set up the name of the event. This could be anything. It's just accurate that we're calling it response because we're modifying our response object. And then we're passing in an instance of an event object. In this case, we're passing a response event, which is a class that we just extended from the base event class. We're passing it the two variables that we need to work with, response and request. And now that we have an event, we can add a listener to it. So if we look at our front.php file, we've created our dispatcher already, and now we're going to add a listener. And we're putting the name of the event, which is the same event that we created in our framework.php file. This response aligns with response right here. Go back to front.php. And next, we're setting up a callback. In this case, we're using an anonymous function. And what gets passed here is whatever we passed in as a second parameter into our event. So if we go to framework.php and look here, new response event is what's getting passed in to our listener. So we'll go back to front.php. So now event is just an instance of response event, and we had to set up our class. I'm going to open up response event. It's just a wrapper for whatever variables we need to work with or modify. In this case, it's response and request. And we create two getters, one for response, one for request, in order to pull these properties from this class. Now, if you're new to object-oriented programming, you're probably thinking, why don't we just use the properties directly? Why don't we access response and request? Why do we need these wrappers? Well, we talked a little bit about this in the object-oriented programming section, but the idea with a getter is that it gives us more control over what we send back. If we want to test this class, it's going to be easier to test these methods, get response and get request, than it would be testing the properties directly. Finally, if we go back to front.php, what we're doing inside of this anonymous function is grabbing our response, checking a few things to make sure that this is a valid HTML request and not a request for something else like a redirect or a JSON object or XML. And then we're just adding on GA code to our content and setting that as the content.